So today's agenda is we're going to talk about the definition of a VA rating. We're going to dive into how the VA rates disabilities. We're going to really get into understanding VA math. That'll be the crux of today's presentation. And then we're going to talk a little about factors affecting disability compensation and provide you with some helpful resources for the future. So everybody buckle up, we'll get started.
Excellent.
So what is a VA disability rating? A medical condition will only be granted service connection by the VA if it is the result of an injury or disease which occurred on active duty military service, or if that injury or disease was made worse by active duty military service. The one exception to that statement is the presumptive conditions that the VA now recognizes due to exposures, such as Agent Orange and the burn pits. So how does VA rate each disability, or why you can't be 250% disabled? So the whole concept with the VA disability rating system is the whole person theory. So this means that the VA does not add whole numbers together. They take percentages of percentages. The theory is that if you are 10% disabled, then you are also 90% healthy. So the next rating is not added on top of the previous one, but it's used to take a percentage of the healthy 90%. So if you're following along with me here, let's take an example of a veteran that has two 10% ratings. The first rating is 10% of 100, which is 10%. The second rating is 10% of 90%, which is 9%. So remember that we are dealing with the healthy percentage of the veteran. So in that example, 10% plus 9% equals 19%. Okay. That final number, after you add all the disability percentages, the final number is rounded either up or down to the nearest 10%. So this 19% would be rounded up to a 20% rating. So the whole idea is that if you have no disability at all, then you're a 100% whole person. If you, for example, have a 30% disability, that would mean you're 30% disabled, but you're 70% whole. So each subsequent rating is a reduction of the whole person that is remaining. Okay, so that's why a combined rating can never be more than 100%. The VA uses what's called the Code of Federal Regulations to rate each condition according to its severity and its symptoms. So this is the same for every veteran that has the same diagnosis. They use the same criteria, okay? The ratings range in 10% increments starting at 0 and all the way up to 100%. And yes, you can have one condition that is rated 100%. Unfortunately, that would normally mean something like an active cancer or something along those lines. I also want to point out that a 0% rating by the VA is very important. A lot of times I get questions about, I got 0%. Why did the VA deny this condition? It didn't. The VA granted service connection for that condition, and that's why they assigned a percentage. But what they're saying is right now, the level of severity is not severe enough that it warrants disability compensation. But that's important because in the future, if that condition worsens, you may be able to place a new claim to have it reevaluated, and maybe it's gotten to the point where it does meet a higher rating level for compensation purposes. Okay.
Great. Thank you for explaining that. That's wonderful, as well as you broke down the complexity of the VA disability rating.
Yeah.
So what about our VA math? How did I get this rating?
Okay, so the world of VA math, you know, when you and I are doing math, we would take 50 and add 30 and we would come up
Mhm.
with 80, right?
Right.
No, not with the VA. They use their own, we call it VA math, but they use their own combined rating. Um, the methodology behind this is that they start with the highest disability percentage and they arrange all of the ratings from highest to lowest, and then they use the combination ratings on a table that I will show you. They proceed
Mhm.
through each of the conditions. So let's look at that table. Everybody wants to see the
Okay.
table, right?
Yes. Here it
So
is.
this is the combined ratings table, everybody. This is actually what VA uses to add up disability ratings. So what I want to point out on this particular slide, the combined ratings table, is you have numbers that are aligned vertically up and down, and then you have rows that are across horizontally.
Mhm.
So what we'll do is I'll describe the concept, and then in the next couple of slides, we'll show the computation process. Okay, let's move on to the next
Excellent.
slide where we can get into it a little bit deeper here.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to use Veteran Joe today. He's our example, and Veteran Joe has ratings of 50%, 30%, and 10%.
Mhm.
So when we look at that combined rating table, we would find 50% in the first column of the table on the vertical edge. And if you look on the slide here, number 1 with an arrow is the 50% line. Okay, his second highest rating is 30%. So then you're going to take the top number 2 in red. That's the 30% row. Where those two intersect, right there, it comes up to 65%.
Mm.
Okay, so you can see very clearly how 50 plus 30 is not 80 with VA math.
Mhm.
It's actually 65%. So moving on to try to get a little closer to his overall combined rating, we now start at 65% that we just found on here. And we go over to where you see number 3 with the blue arrow. That's the row that has 65. And
Mhm.
the fourth rating that he has is a 10% rating. So you go across the top, the horizontal, number 4 in blue, and that's where I find the 10%. You go to the intersection point of those two, and it's 69.
Mm.
So that is his last rating. So that is where we stop and we either round up or we round down. In this case, 69 is higher than 65. So we're going to round up to a 70% rating for this veteran.
Okay.
So that's the combinator. And interestingly enough, we have heard that this is a term used by VA employees
Mm.
to refer to the combined rating table. They call it the combinator. So, so we
That's
thought
great.
that was kind of funny.
Now that, and this explains, right, why 90% plus 10% does not equal 100%.
Exactly, because we've just gone through that in our
Mhm.
example. And here's a little snippet of the combined rating table. And we're trying to point out here, like you just mentioned, Sarah, 90 plus 10. So if
Mhm.
we look at this and we find the vertical row for 90 and we find the horizontal row for 10, where they intersect is 91. So
Mm.
you can see that if you had a 90% rating and you got one more that was a 10%, you're going to be at 91, which is not high enough to round up. So you're still going to be at 90%.
Mhm.
Okay. And this also depicts the higher a veteran's rating, the more difficult it becomes to achieve the next higher rating. Okay.
Mm.
If you look
Mhm.
across on that 90% row horizontally,
Mhm.
it would take a 50% condition to get to 95, which would then round up to 100.
Mhm.
So a lot of times I have veterans who say, I've got a 90% rating and I've got one more condition. You know, if I could get 10% for that, maybe I can get a 100% rating.
Mhm.
Nothing could be further from the truth. It's going to take
Yeah.
a lot more if you've got a 90% rating to reach 100. So that's it in a nutshell, how the combined rating table works. And
Mhm.
like I said, it's based on that whole person theory, which I think is a very interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
They like
No,
to
and
see the
you've
part of you that's healthy as well.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. I want to see the part that's healthy.
Yeah.
You've done a wonderful job breaking this down and explaining the combinator and how the VA comes to these decisions. And understanding that can really help eliminate some of the frustrations that service members experience. And your
Yeah.
expertise in explaining that has been very beneficial. What
Thank you.
about the value of a VA disability rating?
Well, the value of a VA disability rating is number one, the tax-free monthly compensation that it
Mhm,
affords to the veteran. That is very important so that they can maintain their lifestyle, help pay for health care and needed things like that. Um,
mhm,
every veteran just has a single combined VA disability rating, and it is that percentage that determines the amount of compensation that the veteran receives every month. In addition, veterans who are rated 30% or higher are allowed to have additional compensation for a dependent spouse and or dependent children. Now, this is called dependency, and that's a separate application, but it's very simple to do. You have to provide VA with your marriage certificate and your children's birth certificates, and then they will go ahead and start paying you additional compensation for having those dependents. Another thing that's really important and valuable for VA disability rating for our military retirees is that once they reach the 50% rating level, that's called concurrent receipt. So those retirees are allowed to receive all of their military retired pay and all of their VA disability compensation with no offset, those two in their entirety. So those are two very important steps in the VA disability rating scheme that afford more value for the veteran.
yeah.
Um, Also, COLAs. Every year, Congress votes on a COLA for VA compensation. Typically, it's in line with the amount that they grant to Social Security recipients. So it's right along those lines.
Mhm,
Um, I also wanted to point out that when the claim is adjudicated, the VA sends out a rating decision letter, and that rating decision letter may look like a lot of gobbledygook, but if you take the time to look through it, it has a lot of really valuable information. It takes each condition and it tells you the evidence that they considered. It tells you what regulations they applied to arrive at their decision and the basis for the percentage evaluation that they assigned. It also gives information about what it would take to reach the next higher rating level for that
mhm.
particular diagnostic code. And this is helpful because so often I get an inquiry from a veteran to say, I have this condition. I think it might be worse. I'm not sure if it's bad enough to meet the next higher level. And I always point them back to the rating decision because it identifies exactly what it takes to meet that next higher rating level. Um,
That's really important.
it
And I'm
is,
glad
yeah,
that you highlighted that. Again, it can help with what some people experience as frustration in understanding the VA claims process in the VA
yeah,
adjudication process. And so knowing that the Code of Federal Regulation is there to be helpful, to be able to show how do you get to the next level, and then
yeah,
what the combined rating means. So
yeah.
this is incredibly valuable information that you are sharing today. What about any other factors that can affect this compensation?
Yeah, so in addition to the disability rating, there are some other factors that can increase the level of compensation that the veteran receives. These are special monthly compensation factors, as they're called, and they're basically more complex disabilities, like you can see here: anatomical loss, paralysis, blindness, deafness, if the veteran is bedridden or
Mhm.
homebound. Things like that, the VA takes into consideration and can award additional monies due to these catastrophic disabilities.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
thanks for asking.
important. Yeah, important to note as well. And
Mhm.
then finally, what about some resources, right, for everyone who is listening to be able to find the help that they need, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We love to give lots of resources.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that knowledge is power. I mean, the more you
Mm-hmm.
know about this stuff, the better off you are. So here's a list of some of the resources that we put together. And the first one is the VA combined rating table. So if you want to play around with your ratings and do the VA math for yourself, you have access to the rating table itself so that you can do that. I also wanted to point out with the combined rating table that it's all done by computer at VA. The chances of them making a mistake on your combined rating are extremely, extremely rare. So I just wanted to give people that peace of mind that it is
Right.
done automatically. We're not sitting here like I did in the examples and finding the intersection points and going forward from there. And the second bullet highlights a VA web page which details combined ratings a little further, some good information there. The third bullet here is a VSO listing. So I would like to encourage any veteran who is interested in filing a VA disability claim to work with an accredited VSO. It's so, so
Mhm.
important. These folks will help a veteran free of charge. They are trained and knowledgeable and experienced in all things VA, especially in the claim adjudication process. So it's really important. I would not advise to file a VA claim on your own. It can be done, but it's not advisable. You really need the help of an advocate. The fourth bullet here is the VA Contact Center. That's their main call center 800 number. They can point you in the right direction for anything that you might need from VA. And lastly is a helpful YouTube video. Similar to what I've just gone through in my slides, but it explains further how the VA arrives at the disability rating percentage that they assign to each veteran's claim. So I hope that you've gained the knowledge and we've provided resources that everyone is looking for today, Sarah. And thank you everybody for tuning in, and thank you for having me on today, Sarah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jodee, for being here. Again, this was presented by AFMA, our VA 101, understanding how they come to a combined rating and understanding your rating decision. And so I want to thank Jodee Neumann, who is our team leader here with our VA benefits team at AFMA, for bringing her subject matter expertise to this and highlighting and educating everybody here about how do you actually get that VA combined rating on your adjudication letter. So thank you all for joining today. As you can see on the bottom, if you have any questions, the member benefits at afma.com is more than happy to help. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.